Welcome to Stop Motion Magazine's S1 Silicone Puppet tutorial for making plastic tie-down feet. And what you're going to find out in this tutorial is we're going to make feet for your puppet. And it's going to be made out of plastic, and it's going to be a tie-down as well. And this is a great one because it'll allow you to basically have a very secure tie-down that shouldn't break, and it's great. We've used these in Robot Chicken and all sorts of other things. Now what you'll see here is the final completed puppet. A couple things to take note. It's got clothing on it that has to be made separate. It also has static hands, which mean that they're still hands. They do not move. They can rotate. You can bend the wrist back, but the fingers don't move, and this is so you can replace them and put like fists and whatever. It's kind of like you do the same thing for replacement mouse. This character is actually great for backgrounds and all sorts of other stuff. The body is made out of silicone. The head is made out of plastic. The mouths are made out of Sculpey. Hands are made out of plastic, and then the feet are made out of plastic. And the plastic tie-downs allow you to basically make it stand and walk, and they're a lot more secure than a wire bolt version that we have in other tutorials. And then this puppet can be modified, so just take it as a rough and you guys do whatever you want to your own designs. It's basically like that. So let's get started. So here we have some Mego action figure shoes and some Sculpey inside them. And that's going to be our base. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to put it on some cardstock, and I'll take Legos and surround the whole thing. I'm basically going to build up a wall, and we're going to have a mold wall built from Legos. This has been going on for years. People have been doing this. I originally saw this type of technique in Japan, where people were making action figures, custom Gundam action figures and props. And that's kind of where I got this idea from, and just kind of modified it. Now, I've seen other people take this technique and do it. There's some amazing things to it. I'm not claiming that I'm the originator of it, because I'm not, but it's a great, fun idea. So you just take some Legos and build it up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to glue down some this plastic stripping. You don't have to use this. You could use anything, even like little pieces of wood or whatever you come up with. But you're going to have to make channels, and this is to allow the plastic to kind of go through and pour out. So I'm using hot glue. I'm going to glue down my my wall, and this will allow me to basically make sure that it's secure. We're securing everything basically at this point. Next, I'm going to glue down the feet. This is to secure just a little dab, because we're going to have to take that little foam core off of the base at some point. So don't like super glue stuff down, right? Just a little dot just to secure it. And you should be fine with that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make channels with that plastic that you had seen before, and then also there's a what is that? Wet clay little edges. This is my secure areas. Those little gray things. And what this plastic stuff does is it allows the plastic to be poured down the middle. You can see between the two shoes. It'll go up through the toes and then out the back of the shoe, and that's to to push all the air bubbles right out, so you don't have to have any of that stuff. And you'll also notice that basically, I mean, I could have reversed this actually. I could have had it so that the toe would have been the high part, and so that would have had less bubbles coming out, but whatever. Anyways, now in the corners you're going to see that clay. That clay is to make what's called keys, and that's so you can attach the two pieces together in the right shape. They're all a little off kind of in the size of the square, and that's allow it to be like a key. They fit together perfectly when they're put properly together. All this stuff's glued in with hot glue, very light on the hot glue, by the way. Now I'm using it's called FX mold silicone. It's by Motion Picture Effects. This is a tin-based silicone. I'm also using, they have a high pro blue activator that comes with it. And I'm also using what's called UFC. And this UFC is ultra fast cast. And what this does is it increases or actually reduces the amount of time that your silicone takes to cure. Just a few drops can actually considerably change something that would take 24 hours down to like 3 hours for a cure. So it's great stuff. Now, Motion Picture Effects makes great silicone. You could also get a 10 base silicone from anybody. I would suggest 10 over platinum. Platinum's expensive, and 10 reacts less to crazy stuff. So anyway, go out there and get a silicone that will work for you. It's also probably better to get a silicone that's closer to you in your region instead of just ordering it something that's on the other side of the world. That way it travels well, and you know that it's not super old by the time you get it. Now, you're going to need a scale. You're going to have to zero out that scale as well. Always zero out your scales. This is an old scale from Japan, so I kind of heisted this from my wife. Poor thing. I got to buy her a new scale. It's been years, and you can see it's covered in all sorts of like foam latex and stuff. Here we have me just goofing off. No, basically, there's a plastic cup that you have to put down. I suggest plastic cups over anything else. You can actually use a regular container, regular plastic container that you can use over and over again by just pulling out the old cured silicone. That's also advisable. I tend to destroy those things, so I don't use them. And you weigh out your silicone. Don't worry about bubbles at this stage. It's something, it's not even to be concerned about, honestly. In fact, speaking about bubbles, bubbles are your worst enemy in making a silicone mold. Your first layer, and this is something advisable for a lot of people. A lot of people like to, if you're doing this professionally, a lot of people like to degas your silicone, and then, and I'll show you that in another tutorial, actually in the S1 body tutorial. But degassing is not necessarily necessary for making these little plastic pieces. If you do have a bubble in your silicone mold, you've done something wrong. For one, you can just pour your silicone right into the mold, and if you're using like a 10 base silicone, like a GI 1000 or this Motion Picture Effects silicone, it tends to be the viscosity of it tends to allow for the bubbles to escape out the top of it. So it'll allow you to pour your stuff and not have to worry about dealing with, so to speak, the bubbles on your first layer of silicone. If you're really concerned about it, make a small batch and then just paint it in and then let it cure. And by doing that, you're really just, allowing your first layer to not have any of those so to speak bubbles. But I mean, honestly, I've done hundreds of molds, and my usual first bet is just to pour to the side, let it fill up all the spaces, try to push the air out that way, and then I switch to a high pour, and that will allow the bubbles to actually pull out of the silicone and then to build up a layer, and I get away with that like 99% of the time. So you'll see I poured the blue stuff in there. You also the high pro blue activator. You also see a little jar of Bestine in the corner there. Bestine's used for cleaning up silicone if you spill it or something. So now I'm putting the UFC activator, and I'm actually putting an awful lot in there, but it's fine. I think it's actually 1% for your full mix that you actually put in there. And then you stir this sucker up, and it will turn everything blue, including your hands. So wear gloves. And I'm just using now I've gotten shit from people about this before, but I'm using a popsicle stick, and I'm stirring this stuff nice and evenly. I know my hand's in the way here, but just bear with us. And there we go. And dude, it doesn't matter if you use a popsicle stick or a freaking steel thing. In fact, it's probably better that you use a popsicle stick so that it doesn't have any metal to react with the silicone. I've never had any issues. If you're going to be anal about using your sticks, then you got an issue. Let's mix this stuff up. And yeah. Now once it's completely mixed up, I mean, I sped this up a little bit. I pour it in the corner, and I let that sucker build, and I elevate the silicone, and this allows the bubbles to stretch. Now I do two batches because I really didn't measure out my silicone, and that's fine. Let's try to get as much in there as possible. There we go. Now I'm just goofing off at this point. Alright, and I hit it just to kind of give it a shock. Here's the second batch of silicone after I've mixed it. And I'm just covering this sucker up. Now you're going to let this cure. I mean, if you're using the UFC, you're going to let it cure for anywhere between, you know, a couple hours to maybe 5 hours max. You can do a ton of molds in one day, and that's a great thing about using the UFC. Now you see here there's bubble on the top of that. There's not going to be bubbles in the mold, so don't even worry about it. Pull your cardstock off gently after you flipped your mold and it's cured. Do this really gently, and you'll see that there's a bunch of stuff. Now there's also flashing underneath all the stuff. Not a big deal. You're going to use, I'm pulling out the keys here. This is important. You're going to use an X-Acto knife, and you're going to cut away all this flashing, including the flashing around your mold object, like the feet and the little guides for the flow of the stuff. And here I'm using the X-Acto knife. And then once this is done, you're going to just build up that mold wall again, and then you're gonna use a brush or your finger or whatever, and you're gonna apply a thin layer of mold release, which is Palmolive dishwashing soap in the color of green. And this was actually a tip given to me by professionals in the field that I've worked with, and you know, also the guys at Motion Picture Effects say that that's the stuff that everybody uses, honestly, and I've been using it for years, and honestly never had a problem. I say honestly a lot, don't I? Isn't that annoying? Anyway, here we are pulling all that stuff off. Dun, dun, dun. Just using that precision X-Acto blade and being really careful. You do not want to cut yourself, one, and two, you do not want to cut into the mold too deep. Just get that surface area and clean it up. Now let's skip ahead here. All right, now we're at the section where you're going to use that Palmolive soap that I was talking about. There's a nice little picture of it so you know exactly what we were talking about. And I'm using my finger, and I'm just coating the blue areas. I'm not trying to get onto the plastic shoe or the other pieces. And this is going to act as your release agent, so when you pour your second half and it cures, you'll be able to pull the two apart. It's basically a barrier. Now, there's also a spray out there that companies make that you can spray on there. I've actually had really bad luck with that spray. I refuse to use it, honestly. I've glued together two halves of a mold and had to actually use what's called a diamond cut to actually separate them, and that was or a jeweler's cut, and that was a little bit of a nightmare. That was a while ago, and I've never made that same mistake twice. So you'll see I actually had some schmegma kind of stuck in between the teeth of the Legos. This is from using Legos for over and over again for years. I use Legos for silicone molds, and I use them also for ultracal molds every once in a while. So we're just going to build up this Lego wall and basically get the mold rocking. Now, if you're into making molds and stuff, the Legos are a great option because they're recyclable. You can constantly use them over and over and over again. If you do not have access to Legos, you can just use foam core and hot glue, and that works just as good. Another technique is, a lot of times you can make heads just using a little paper cup or plastic cup, and you hot glue the model head that you've made and stick it inside there, inside the cup with a, what do you call that, a little piece of plastic underneath it so that it's a pore area, usually a little straw or something. Now, once you've built up this mold wall, you're going to need some threaded rod that will actually, you'll have bolts for, you know, or nuts for, and that you're going to tie on there. Here you'll see they're already pre-cut for myself, a little threaded rod, and this is going to serve as a channel. There we go, a little threaded rod there. It's going to serve as a channel so that way you can basically stick your bolt through there, and then put a little tie down nut on there, and then that will get stuck inside the plastic when it's casted. So I hot glue it, try to get it as vertical as possible, and try to be as gingerly and gentle as possible so it will stand up straight. And it just gets hot glued, and don't touch this after you've done it and it's solid. I mean, of course I'm touching that to make sure it's stiff, but you just got to make sure that it's staying there, and then just leave it. See, just a little hot glue. Don't worry if there's a little overlap on the mold. You can clean this later when you cast your plastic. You can kind of sand it down. All right, we'll let that sit there for a second and dry, and then we're going to mix up some more silicone. And here we go, mixing up some more silicone. And let's jump ahead a little bit so you don't have to watch me pour this stuff again. So once again, you know, it's got the ultra fast cast, the catalyst, and the silicone all mixed together. I'm trying to make sure there's no white. That's the one problem with these ribbed cups, is they always have like a little channel in there, but you know, as long as you mix it well enough, it'll be fine. Mixing the hell out of that stuff. So there's no white. It's as solid blue as possible. And then I'm going to pour it, and there it goes. And you see I just kind of poured it right over there. That's because there was no major areas that would cause any bubbling. So you just pour it right on there, and it goes right into the channels. And I probably do maybe about 2 batches of this. And basically I'm going to just try to cover those bolts as best as I can. And then we're just going to let this sucker sit there and cure. Now, if you get silicone all over the place, just let it cure and then peel it away. If you have that silicone that doesn't have any activator in it, you could just use that Bestine that I was talking about and just paper towel and wipe it away. Should be good. Well, this is hours later and it's cured. Now, this mold was done in one whole day, so this is nighttime now in the garage with the lights on. It's cured. I'm going to pull these bricks off, and pulling on the outside. Sometimes it's best to pull towards the inside of the mold to be able to get the other ones off. So you just squeeze like that, and you're going to have some flashing. Don't worry about the flashing. It's just cosmetic. It won't affect anything. And if you really want, you can just take some scissors or some X-Acto knife and cut that stuff off. But really, just leave it. Now all the things are off of there, we're going to separate the mold and see what we got. Be gentle. You can see, there we go, the separating. Now, if you were to just rip this thing apart, you would rip the mold. Silicone is really delicate in the sense that it does have a tensile strength or a tear strength that you can tear apart, but if you just were to shred rip it, you could potentially damage your mold. So just go gentle. Now those metal pieces came off because they were hot glued lightly, and now we're just going to pop those little plastic pieces out and clean up our mold by using an X-Acto knife or some tweezers or some cuticle scissors, and you're just going to cut away at certain areas that might not have, because basically you want to clear that channel out completely to allow the liquid plastic to run through and then out. So, but you'll have to inspect it. I can tell you right now, I see some areas, problem areas that I had to cut away at. Be gentle pulling this stuff out. You don't want to rip your mold. And see, there you go. There's the mold. And there might be little areas here and there that have little spots kind of sticking out on them, like the edge of that foot right there. When you cast your plastic, you can literally just sand that down gently, and it will be fine. And that's actually not an air bubble. That's caused when the two molds where they met, they kind of funkified. Also, maybe I cut it with an X-Acto knife. I wasn't being gentle enough. Now I'm pulling those bolts out. There you go. Now there's the bolt with the nut on it, and this is going to sit inside that first half, or that second half of the mold. See there, it's just sticking them right in there, and it should go in really easy. Right? You want to space them so that they fit snugly in there, but also don't touch any of the walls. That would be a no-no. If they are touching the walls, then you have some issues, and they want to be just kind of completely in the center. I also have them at the front of the foot. That's not necessary, considering it's a solid thing, but it is necessary if you're going to have the foot elevated at any time. And there's some tricks you could do where you can pivot the foot using the bolts, different kind of angled bolts or whatever for your tie downs. I'm using makeup powder here, which basically is baby powder without any fragrance in it. So you can just use, or talcum powder. You can just use baby powder, and it should be fine. I'm gonna use my finger, and I'm gonna smooth it all into all the crevices. This acts as dual purpose. Honestly, it has a purpose for basically allowing the fluids to stick, and it also allows an easier release, so you don't tear your mold when you're pulling out your objects. One of the problems with plastics is sometimes you'll get bubbles, and this helps to alleviate that. Something to consider as well is because of the way that we're pouring this, we're actually very limited in being able to select an angle at which it's going to be poured other than vertically. So you have to be careful when making these that you don't produce bubbles. So you want to be really gentle. Now, checking the two halves together, making sure they fit, and then we're going to put rubber bands around it to secure it. Now we're using a two-part plastic. There's a lot of companies that make this two-part plastic. I would suggest looking at Motion Picture Effects or looking at Silpak. It's S-I-L-P-A-K. There's also Berman has a two-part plastic. Berman Industries. You can also get a two-part plastic from what's that? Smooth On. And Smooth On's kind of like the national in the United States. It's distributed nationally, so you can actually go to like a hobby store, like a Michael's or whatever, and probably find Smooth On. Suggest that. Now, it's an A and B, and if you don't notice, my B part is actually pretty cloudy. This stuff's old. It will age. My plastic here is about a year and a half old, and I had a lot of it, and I made a lot of toys and fun things with it. This is just my leftover kind of plastic to play with, and you wanna just take care of this stuff, shake it up and stuff. It will work over time, but you also run into an issue where maybe the plastic is so old that it doesn't cure properly. So you might have to add a little bit more of A or add a little bit more of B, or you might have to shake the crap out of it just so that way it'll and that's probably what I'm doing right here off the camera. So it'll actually have a better, what do you call it, mixture of the ingredients. But after a while, you might get into a point where you might just have to get rid of the plastic completely and pour A into B's bottle and just shake the sucker up and throw it in the trash, because it will make sure it cures first. But it'll be to that point where you're kind of, it's useless. So, all right. So we're going to stir A and B together. And the thing that you don't want in your plastic is any bubbles. So stir it up. It might be useful to put something underneath your mold, so just in case you overspill. But yeah, so stir it up, make sure there's no bubbles in there, and then you can actually tap your cup a little bit before you pour it, and to allow the bubbles to kind of escape underneath. It's one of those dealios. Definitely wear gloves and be aware that this plastic gets hot. So you want to just make sure that you do the right thing. I'm pouring it gently in there, and I'm making sure not to try to overspill. And then so it'll rise to the top and then sink to the bottom. Now the viscosity of this is definitely different since it's an older batch of plastic that I have here. But if you have a newer batch, the liquid, and this is one of the great advantages of having this stuff, the liquid will actually be really viscous. The viscosity will really be more like water, and so when you pour it in, it'll come right up the other sides. Just pouring it in, being gentle. Now what it's doing as it rises and lowers, it's actually pushing. Oops, overspill. pushing the the gas through the chambers on the sides. So it's actually just trying to level out that air. And here, of course, it's setting on me, so it's starting to gel a little bit. I'm trying to. I got frustrated and started pouring into the other one. So just ignore my obnoxiousness at this point. There we go. Now I'm just pushing gas through. And you know, the other thing too is I'm probably in the shoes at this point. I've done this enough to know where I am with stuff, and I'm probably at the point of shoes. So just pouring that in the top just in case. But typically you wouldn't do that. Another one that you could possibly do is you could take a syringe, one of those plastic syringes, and you can actually put your plastic in there and then just squeeze it through. Sometimes that makes a mess, makes things worse, and it'll come out the sides if you push too hard. Now the plastic's cured, and you know that because it's white. This is after maybe 15 minutes of letting it cure and cool down. Took the rubber bands off and separating the two halves. And there you go. Now the bolts are in there. Be gentle and take this plastic out of there. If it's a little soft, you might need to just let it sit and let it cool down even more, so it's solid. Now there's little pieces of silicone in those little chambered areas. That's fine, because the next time that I cast this, that won't happen. So I can pop these suckers off here, or I could use some bolt cutter things, some like wire snips, and I can snip off the front end plastic pieces and then sand them. It's still fairly soft, so I can separate all that. And these little bolts should come right out. So I'll just take some pliers and just twist them out. There you go. We pull those suckers out. And you have a shoe with a tie down. You're going to have to snip off or sand off the flashing, of course, and then all the bulbous areas. You can repair this plastic also with Pro-Epoxy. So the two-part Pro-Epoxy the hard stuff plumber's epoxy, so to speak, that you mix together, and then you can just see. Look at those shoes. They're gorgeous. They're gorgeous. So you can. I'm checking out where the bolt is, how deep it is. because sometimes you can overestimate and you can put the bolt too close to the top, and that doesn't work very well. Anyway, so point is, you can fix this areas that if you had a bubble or something, you can fix that stuff by hollowing out the bubble and then taking Propoxy, putting it together between your fingers, and then squeezing it into that little area, and then using not sandpaper, you're actually rubbing alcohol, and you can rub out the excess, and then wipe it down with a paper towel or whatever. Make sure it's nice and clean. See, I'm using some. These are actually really cool snippers. These are Gundam snippers, believe it or not. I got these in Japan, and they're the best thing ever for when you're playing with plastics. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to get those, look online for like Gundam tools and stuff. You can find that stuff. Anyway, yeah, so you'll clean off that little edge area with where the Propoxy is, and by doing that, you'll let it cure, and it will harden. And this works great if you have smooth stuff. If you don't have smooth stuff, you actually hollow stuff out using or clean stuff up, add texture using like an X-Acto blade or a toothpick. And that really works out well too. Here we go. Here's the shoes after they've been sanded and prepped. You'll also notice that it has a drill holes in it. That's for where you're going to put your foot pegs or leg pegs in there. And then they're primed. You have to prime them so you can paint them. I'm basically using Krylon Indoor-Outdoor Primer Gray. They have a plastic version. Stay away from that stuff. That stuff sucks. This regular one is great. You can clean off the plastic, by the way, by using rubbing alcohol. And then they're painted. I painted them white, spray paint white, and then used a flesh tone using burnt umber and some white. Now the character's fully closed because we're going to glue these feet onto the body. So you need to have the clothes already made, put them on, or you have to have like a technique where you can fit the legs over and then seam it up afterwards. I'm going to sand this the little leg posts of the aluminum wire there. I'm going to use a sandpaper, and I'm just going to basically etch in scratches. Dan Fields, my buddy Dan Fields, was saying in the podcast, if you haven't listened to the podcast yet, to use wire cutters and score it. It's called scoring. And you score those suckers, and that will give the wire some grip, and that will allow the plastic and the glue to adhere to that region and not come off. Now here I'm using JB Weld, and by the way, do all this stuff in a well-ventilated area. You don't want to be breathing any of these chemicals in. It's not healthy stuff. But anyway, use the JB Weld, 2 parts, mix them together. Use a toothpick, stick that stuff in the hole of the shoe, and then you're going to take the shoe and you're going to stick it into that, where you're going to take the leg and stick it into that hole. And make sure you get the feet on the right legs, because if you don't, then you're really messed up. But here we go. Just mix that stuff together. Now you'll see I'm using this little silicone pad right there. This is a technique I learned from Fawn Davis in one of his mold making tutorials that I bought from him. Fawn's a great guy, really nice. He was on the cover of one of our magazines. And basically, you use any of your excess silicone, and you either leave it in a cup or you pour it into a container that is big, and then that will cure. And then you pull that out, and instead of throwing it away, you use that as your mix palette, which will permanently be non-sticky. You can always do sticky stuff that you think like cementing and whatever, like this epoxy cement, and then you can let it cure, and then you can pull that stuff off of there and reuse it over and over again. This is a way of recycling your goods. Yeah, now see I use a toothpick, smoothing off that little excess off there. Just get in there, be gentle. And then take my gloves off, make sure they're clean. My hands are clean. And then I'm going to try to get these feet in there. And it might squish out some of the goo. That's fine. Just got to get that that sucker in there. And another factor to consider here as well is make sure that your cuts are even on your wires, because if they're not, your foot's going to be off slightly. You know, the only way to really cure that is just pull the foot off a little bit on the other one, just kind of so they're even. But try to get your feet as even as possible. Just try to stay as consistent as you possibly can. Measure your stuff out. You can tell here and they may not be perfect. That's the other thing too. The way that your wire cutters work, it might leave a little bit of a smooth edge. There is a way of fixing that, but if you're in a rush, man, just try to even it up. So there we go. I'm evening up my character here using the friction of the actual plastic glue and wire together to allow it to stand perfectly. Now you're gonna let this sucker cure for 24 hours. You know, honestly, I wouldn't use it for 48 hours. And there he is. He's standing on his own. There's no tie downs underneath. I mean, there's tie down feet, and we'll show you that in another video in the future. But he's a standing complete puppet. Now, the advantage of this is if you were to use a wire in the foot, and then it went to the bolt like we did in the foam latex tutorial, the weight of the silicone will eventually, you know, you'll pull forward, and then, you know, the puppet could, you know, fall forward on its face. I've done this so many times where, you know, as you're learning through the process, you find out that certain things work and certain things don't work. This works great. Now, the great thing about this as well is you can get run cycles out of this sucker. You can get all sorts of great things out of this guy. He's a very dynamic puppet. If you don't like the hands with the little seam there, you can actually do a full silicone arm and then build in sockets. And that's actually a great option as well. Yeah, and you know, the clothing on this puppet's done in a certain type of material or whatever. But my point is this is a very good base design to build off of. You can do a lot with this, just this basic concepts. Take the design that I'm showing you here and go out and make your own kind of design. Modify things the way that you know, and experiment. Chances are if you're buying silicone, you're probably buying a small amount. So you also want to be very careful with how much you use. If you can't afford it, buy enough that you can actually make mistakes. Buy enough that you can actually experiment. And I always suggest experimenting first before you actually make, you know, it's called R&D, research and development. You build off the designs and you discover what works for you and what doesn't work. And yeah, we're at the end of the video, and I hope you liked this. If you haven't had a chance to check out the other videos where we make the silicone body and the armature or the head, head over to there and check those out. Other than that, check out stopmotionmagazine.com for the latest and greatest news that's happening in the stop motion world. I am John Akuma, the executive editor of Stop Motion Magazine. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.